Hey everyone, welcome to this week's podcast of JHPMC. I'm Vaidehi, your host for today, and I have with me Akash, my super awesome co host. And I'm thrilled to have Rudra Roy Choudhury with us today. He has an extensive experience in product management across tech, AI, healthcare, and is here to share his awesome, valuable insights with us from his incredible career journey. Welcome, Rudra.
Hi Vaidehi. Hi Akash. Nice to be here.
Hey. So, in today's conversation, we'll dive into key aspects of product management like crafting standout resumes, navigating interviews, and leveraging network strategies and breaking into specialized fields like AI, automation, etc. And Rudra will also share his journey towards earning his prestigious EB1A Einstein visa and how it ties to his contributions to product management. So, without further ado, let's get started. Rudra, thank you so much for joining us today. So, to kick things off, your experience spans from building AI and automation products across, industries like B2B tech, we have healthcare, we have e-commerce. So, given such a diverse and fascinating range of domains that you've worked with, how have these experiences influenced your approach to product management? And if I may ask, like, what common principles have you found that apply across these industries?
Yeah, I think that's a good question to start a conversation with. A couple of things that I can think of, right now at the top of my mind. One, I would say is, um, irrespective of which industry, which particular sector, like you might be working as a PM in, you'll have to keep your customers as a focus, like at the center of everything, right? So every decision that you make, you have to make sure that is this something that's going to solve the pain point for my customer, right? And only then you think about, okay, how I build it, how I scale it, and things like that. Talking about scaling, I think that's another thing which is kind of common across product management, which is that at the end of the day you are trying to take a business to the next level, right? And you need to very thoroughly understand that the problem that I'm trying to solve, is this problem really important enough, right? I mean, there are many problems around us if we look, and we might be excited to solve each one of them. However, solving each one of them is not really necessary, right? So given we have constraints of budget, resources, and everything, we want to make sure that we are picking and choosing the right problem which has the most relevance, and through that, through solving that problem, we are able to cater to the largest group of customers, right? So scaling is also something which is very important. You need to keep in mind as a product manager before you go and try to solve a problem. And then the third thing I can add here, which would be that, uh, and we'll probably speak a lot about this later on. When you are thinking about using like new technologies, something like AI, for example, in this case, to solve problems, I think as a product manager, there is an inclination sometimes when you tend to feel that I want to use this latest tech which is out in the market and do something with it. But again, that is really not your aim, or that should not be the goal, right? The goal should be that what do I need to do to solve the problem for my customer? That should be the starting point, and that should drive whether you need to use a certain tech or not. Like, if I have a problem which is very important for my customers, and I can see that I can use something like a AI to kind of do that at scale, of course, why not? But if I don't need AI to solve an important problem for my customer, I don't want to unnecessarily make things complicated, right? I mean, and I've heard a lot of leaders talk about this, which is most of the solutions that have really scaled, at large, are solutions which are very simple in nature, right? You don't want to, I mean, it's not like I want to unnecessarily make complex and fancy products. As long as the product is simple and the customers can use it in their day-to-day life to solve their problem. I mean, that's all really that matters at the end of the day. So I would say, there can be many, but these three are like the top three principles that I keep in mind, uh, as I kind of walked across these different industries.
Yeah, I mean that's like perfectly put. I feel Rudra, but because like a lot of people use AI, but they don't know how to use AI in the right way, and you put it very well on how to solve problems and how to find the right kind of problems. Uh, so I wanted to take a step back, and I wanted to go through your journey of getting to this place. You have done a dual master's degree, as you know, like you've come from a highly technical background, and you've done your masters in cornell as well. So I want to know, how did both of these tie up into product management? If you can like give us like a brief history or like a journey of how this all happened from uh,
Absolutely.
from the very beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, like you said, I started off my career, pretty much like most of us have done in engineering. So I was a electrical engineer. I did my first master's in India at IIT Madras in electrical engineering, where I focused a lot on building electrical systems for healthcare. Um, so once I kind of completed, the 3 years of my master's at IIT Madras, I went on to work in industry. I joined this company called Siemens Healthineers, who is a pioneer in building medical devices and diagnostics products. I worked in the R&D division at Siemens for a couple of years before making my move to, come to the US and join Cornell for my second master's degree, which was in management. um, so if I talk about motivation, right, and this was a pretty planned motivation, I would say. I like After I walked like 4 or 5 years, through my master's research back in India and also in Siemens, I kind of realized that it's very exciting, no doubt, to build these products hands on. But at the end of the day, what really matters is, can I successfully take this product to market? And does this, really solve like problems for a lot of customers, right? And when I tried to dig in a little deep, that's when I learned about this role of product management, right? Because as product managers, that's really what we are responsible for. I mean, we're not really kind of hands-on building a lot of stuff. Like, we have the engineering team to do that. We have the designers to kind of come up with a design of how the prototype or the product should look like. But what we are really doing is that we're trying to understand that, okay, here is my customer, what are the different problems they are facing, what is the most important problem that they have right now, and how can we solve that problem, right? So just bridging that gap between customers and building that solution, I think that's where kind of product managers really come into play. And once I learned about these, I felt like, okay, this is something that really intrigues me. I think this can be more exciting than what I do today. And that made me kind of make that jump. I came to the US for my second master's degree in management. um, I thought that program at Cornell, it kind of definitely helped me to get, some of the basics of product management, because till that time point, I've been very much technical, in my activities, right? And there
So
are,
can you just elaborate what exactly were you highly technical in for the audience? Uh, like
sorry,
you said, uh, you were highly technical in which discipline?
so as in electrical engineering R&D. So that could
Okay.
mean from building electronic systems to carrying out testing in the labs, to writing codes in something like a MATLAB, which can kind of combine different electronic systems. So that was my main job functionality, if I have to explain.
All
So
right. But how did this move all the way to Gen AI, where you're working with like apps and mobile apps and automation software? How did that happen?
yeah, so that's a long story, but if I have to summarize, so I came to the US once I graduated from Cornell. I worked for a couple of companies before moving to Tubi as a product manager. And this was roughly in 2022 when I moved to Tubi. I started working on some of the fundamental software internal tools that we have at Tubi, and that caters to different sets of customers, both internal and external. And that's also around the time, 2023, when Gen AI really happened. I mean, AI has been there for a long time. It's not new. It's just that the fact that we can use AI for our day-to-day use cases, that's something that became famous after Gen AI started around end of 2023, when ChatGPT came out. And like many other companies, we started to explore at Tubi as well, that okay, do we have problems that we can solve using Gen AI at scale, right? So we carried out exercise internally, where we told everyone in the company, doesn't matter whether you're a product manager or project manager or engineer or whatever, but we asked everyone that okay, you know what our business is, our customers. If you have an idea in mind that you feel that okay, this is something that we can solve using Gen AI, then just drop that idea, share that idea with us, right? So we collected the idea across the company. I remember we had roughly around, I think, 85 or 90 ideas that kind of were collected. And eventually from there we narrowed down to three ideas, which we said that okay, these are the top three ideas based on scalability and importance of the problem and everything. And we want to focus on these three ideas and work on them, right? And one of those three ideas was what I owned. So if you ask me like how I got the chance, I'd say it's not really that I have a like heavy background on AI, but I'd say uh, the at Tubi we kind of, or leadership kind of, looked at all the product managers, in terms of what impact they have been able to create in the company. And through that process they kind of figured out that okay, these are the product managers whom we can discuss with, if they are willing to own one of these products, right? I mean, one important thing is to keep in mind is that it sounds very exciting and fascinating at the top level that I'm building like a product with Gen AI, but there are like hundreds of challenges, right? One of the main challenge being that it's very difficult to convince a lot of people at times that this can actually solve the problem, right? Because I guess it's not just for Gen AI, but even in general, whenever you are trying to do something new, I think people at times can get, they can have this reverse thinking, where they think that no, we don't really want to change what is already working today, right? But the proposal was that yes, we know this is working, but we think this can work thousand times better
Mm-hmm.
if we can rebuild this or redefine this using Gen AI, right? But I think that's where the success of a product manager lies, that you are able to talk with all the stakeholders and convince them through some initial experimentation and data that look, this actually can work. So that's exactly what I did, and then eventually I'm happy that it rolled out. The product got a lot of recognition as well. So yeah, that's how my journey in Gen AI product started.
Wow. Congrats, first of all, that you were able to launch such a great feature for Tubi, and I hope you launch more such features in the future. And I really like the fact, the process that you followed, where you asked internally in your company for ideas, and then you brought them all together and used internal resources to like map your problems and impacts based on that. Uh, I now that you say that, I want to like think. I'm trying to understand how a hardcore electrical engineer went from here to like talking about Gen AI and getting a lot of Gen AI knowledge. Like, what, like, was it what kind of resources that did you use to get to this point? Like, was it at corner that you decided to make this transition? Did you have like, was it the consulting background that you had? uh, or like where exactly that you moved into the computer science domain, or like the hardcore coding domain? How did this happen?
Yeah, so I think this happened, like you said, over a span of time, and of course it was like very much like planned out. It's not something like like one fine morning I just decided and I was able to make the switch, especially for someone like who comes from a background like I did, which is like very very different compared to whatever I'm doing right now. It is very difficult to make this transition. If I'm very honest, like I can say that I needed almost 1.5 years before I could make the move to even product management in a software company. Um,
Okay.
but it was planned. Like I said, I kind of started my research around, okay, what are the things that I need to develop as skills that can help me make this transition. Um, the consulting, I really didn't have any goal of making a career in consulting, but I did a lot of research on LinkedIn and some data places to figure out that, okay, for people like for someone like me who has a very core engineering background, consulting seems to be a good stepping stone for moving to product, right? So that was like the very reason why I decided that, okay, as an intermediary stop, I am okay to move to consulting and spend some time there. And the reason being, I knew that a lot of the work that I do as a consultant does overlap with the kind of skills that will be needed
Mm-hmm.
for product management as well. um,
Mm-hmm.
so that was one reason how why I kind of designed my path in this way. Then moving to software products, like of course when you talk about resources, I think nowadays you have a lot of resources like available open source on the internet. um, like for product management, there's a lot of resources for just generally studying about software products or software products are built. I do read a lot of blogs as well. Like I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
everybody here is familiar with like Lenny's newsletter or podcast, and there are many other
Mm-hmm.
newsletters as well that I often read across. I mean, I would say that that gave me a lot of the initial kick. But the other thing I also want to highlight here is that uh, if someone is really trying to make a switch like this, you have to keep in mind that just depending on studying resources online or doing certifications and things will not really help. This has been my observation through my journey, that certifications and something like doing workshop or whatever is good for your own sake, for you to
Mm-hmm.
build that skill or develop that skill. But there is a difference between you building the skill to you convincing someone else that I have that skill, right? And for that second part where you are trying to convince the recruiter or the hiring manager that I have the skill, you need to show that you have actually practiced that skill, which means that you've actually done something hands-on. That can mean a side project, that can mean some project within your current company where you have used and leveraged that skill, right? So a very simple
Mm-hmm.
example, if I have to say, if I want to, so let's take my own example. When I moved to working on software products, right? When I was in the consulting firm, I proactively researched and talked with my manager and everyone, and I told them that I want to get involved in projects that involve software development, right? Um, and one of my projects when I was in a consulting role was basically building these analytics dashboard that can integrate different business functions and including leadership, and it basically highlights all the key metrics that define the product life cycle, right? Now if you think about it, this is really one of the core pieces that you also can do as a product manager. And through that experience, I believe that it helped me a lot to understand how softwares work, how do you build this dashboard, how do you define metrics, all of that, right? Which later on helped me when I was like preparing for product management interviews. So I think for anyone, if you are in a current role in different company and you have a plan to move to software product management in the capacity of your current company, try to look for opportunities beyond your what like the regular job might be, to figure out such projects that can help you to build those skills. Because I can say that when you're applying for product management roles in software, if you just say that, okay, I finished 3 courses in Coursera and did this workshop, and that's why I have the software product management skills, nobody's going to get convinced. You have to show that I worked on this real life project, which involve these software skills, right? So I think, yeah, that's the way how you can, make this kind of a transition.
Got it. So, talking about breaking into product management, there are a lot of factors like having a good resume, networking, and then getting those interviews. So, something about networking is super crucial, especially in product management if you're, shifting careers. So, how did you approach networking early in your career, and do you have any strategies that you want to recommend for aspiring product managers?
Yeah, that's a very great point to talk about, Heidi. Thanks for bringing that up, because I do feel, and I felt this more after, coming to America, which is that networking is more important than, what we can think of. Like, it's equally important, compared to how much knowledge or skills you have. Uh, there are certain strategies that I had adopted for networking, which have kind of, worked out well for me. So I can talk through them. So one would be, and this is a very fundamental principle, which is that don't look for gains overnight through your network. It doesn't happen. If you are connecting with me today and you're expecting that tomorrow you will get something back from me, it will not happen. There are multiple posts on LinkedIn that goes around saying that, okay, this role is open, drop your email ID and I'll be referring you, with no bad intention. I'm not saying that the person has any bad intention, but it doesn't work. I can guarantee you on that, because understand that there's no special recommendation for you that is going in like that. It's probably a recommendation going for 100 people, right? And that doesn't help you to stand out. So first principle is that you have to spend time, right? You have to spend time and you have to spend effort if you really want to do effective networking. Nothing will happen overnight. Second thing is that when you are networking, make sure that you also have something to give back, right? So it shouldn't be like, I'm so and so and I want this job, can you help me, right? The kickoff for the networking should be more like a conversation, where I say like, I'm interested in this. I look through your profile. I think that, you have a vast experience, and I'd really love to learn more from you regarding, the day to day activities or responsibilities and stuff like that, right? So I think the initiation of the networking should be through a conversation and not through a transaction, right? The third principle I'd like to keep people in mind, which is, um, when you are trying to connect with people, and I still get a lot of these messages, and I recently heard that probably LinkedIn has also changed, some of its like settings, where people cannot really send a message to a lot of others without having the premium account. That's really bad if that is true. But in general, I still say that if you can, and if you do have the premium account, definitely send a very, like, well written message whenever you're trying to connect with someone. I still get a lot of messages from people who do have a premium account, and all they send is like, hey, hi, things like that, right? It just kind of, at the very beginning of the conversation, it kind of creates a very bad impression of yourself, like, even if the other person connects, right? So make sure that you are clearly, writing the message and conveying to the other person that what is your motivation to connect, right? Everyone is very
Mhm.
busy. The other person has least care to connect with you and talk with you, unless and until you are able to convey very clearly that this is the reason why I want to connect with you. And the fourth principle I talk about here, which is that if you don't get something from someone in your network, don't end that relationship, because things move on. You don't know again in the future when you might need their help. I've seen and this has happened with me as well, when, some people have reached out to me, and like, probably they've asked for a referral or whatever at that particular time, and I've done that as well, and it didn't work out, right? And then they vanished, right? Now, if again after 1 year, and it just happened a few days back only, someone reached out to me after a gap of like, I think 1.5 years or so, suddenly saying that they need something else, right? This is very bad because it feels like that person is only okay to reach out to me when they need something.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's like they don't care, right? This is another very bad, like, behavioral characteristics for networking, I would say. So irrespective of whether you get something from someone or not, try to manage some time, and try to manage some way of staying engaged with the other person. And I can share some very simple tricks that has worked for me, right? I mean, everyone is
Mhm.
busy. I'm not saying that you have a lot of time to do all this, but then something like maybe sending an email once a month, I don't think that takes a lot of time. However busy you can be, you can still do that, right? Or something like, if this person is, let's say, posting something on LinkedIn, it can be a whatever newsletter or anything. I mean, I don't think it takes a lot of time to engage on that post, right? At least maybe put a comment like, this is really interesting or something like that, right? I mean,
Mhm.
that really helps me or someone else to kind of keep in mind that, okay, I know this person, I've seen this person who continuously, like, stays in touch with me, engages with me, and that way you just feel extra motivated when you come back to me 1 year later and say that, Rudra, can you refer me for this job post, or can you help me with something, right?
Mhm.
So staying engaged continuously, even if something doesn't work out for the particular moment, I think that is very important. And I know we are very rarely have seen few people who does that. And I think that hurts, because in the long term, your career is not going to be just for the moment. Your career is going to be like a 30-40 year career or even more, right? So you don't know how things come back, how you kind of reconnect with people whom you have
Mhm.
known in the past. So yeah, just like, try to stay engaged and connected with this group of people over a span of time.
Absolutely, that makes a lot of sense. Building quality relationships with people go a long way. Um, so yeah, I was so the next question, talking about after networking, interviews is the next big thing that people are, they want to crack. So, what strategies did you use to prepare for PM interviews, especially while you were, transitioning into these roles in AI and automation? And if you could share some of the most challenging interview questions that you faced and how you tackle it, that would help us a lot.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, no doubt that product management interviews are one of the most important steps for you to get into product role. And I feel, I mean, I've taken interviews like different companies, different industries, and I have felt that it's probably one of the most, like, complicated interviews, in the sense that, like,
Mhm.
there's a lot of things to keep in mind when you are taking a product management interview. So I think first thing, basic, which are like the different PM frameworks. Now I know there is argument I've seen a lot of people doing where they say that, okay, are frameworks really that important? Not important. I can give you my take. As someone who comes from a very different background, I found it really important. And just to break it down, why I'm saying so. So, like I said, as an electrical engineer, very much focused on R&D, and I can tell you that the way we work in core engineering R&D is very different than how software products are built, or how like product management use cases are navigated through. So I for a very good amount of time, I was in this impression that, okay, I don't really need to care about frameworks. I know that if someone asks me a question, I can solve that for them, and that should be enough, right? Which was not enough, actually, because um, in product management interviews, I think it's very few, like, people really care about the final solution. What they're really testing you about is how do you reach that solution? What is the approach you are taking? Do you have the ability to break down a complex problem into steps, right? So that is where I feel that for someone like me and people who come from different kind of backgrounds, knowing these frameworks are super helpful, because then it kind of helps you to put things in structure, right? I know that the way I answer in a product management interview, like, significantly changed after I started learning about frameworks, right? So this is one thing I would highly recommend. Secondly, I'd say, uh, be prepared for any kind of questions, irrespective of which company you're applying to. I think this is especially true for the software industry, because I feel, uh, you know, so just to give an example, what I'm trying to say, I once applied for a health tech company. They basically, they build healthcare systems. And one reason was, of course, my background was in healthcare. So I thought that maybe, this is a very good alignment. I got the interview call. And in my first round, where, uh, the hiring manager wanted to talk through a design question, the question he asked me was, how can you design a certain thing in WhatsApp? Now I was not ready for that, right? Because in my mind, I cannot link WhatsApp with a healthcare company. I'm just literally no overlap if I, say, right? But then I understood later on, like, what was his motivation. He didn't really care about like healthcare or social media, right? He really cared that if I'm given a abrupt problem like that, do I have the ability to think through it and, kind of break down that problem into steps, right, and reach some solution. So since I had that experience, I understood that, okay, I cannot think that if I'm applying for a certain industry, it means that I will be asked questions only from that industry. It can be any design, any case question from any industry. So I just need to be prepared. um, like, reading books is helpful. I think all of us by now know about like the cracking the PM interview book, which is very helpful, no doubt. I watched a lot of videos. I would say, like, for me personally, watching those videos were more helpful than reading the book. So there is this, it's open source. You don't have to pay or anything. So there's this channel called Exponent, which is available on YouTube. I watched a lot of videos on Exponent. There are some videos on this channel called PM School, which is also available on YouTube. So these were, like, if I have to say, these were the two main resources, like, that I made a habit that, okay, every now and then I want to watch these videos. And they have like different kind of videos. Like, they have mock interviews, they have just talking through a particular framework and really trying to, make the listener understand that, why to think in a certain way. So I think those videos kind of really helped me, create that product mindset, which I didn't have early on. um, and for questions, yes, I mean, I said that WhatsApp question, that was something that kind of completely threw me off. I think the other thing I want people to be really cognizant of for product interviews, and this is again a mistake that I have made in the past, which is that, when you are writing something, let's say in your resume, we all know by now that, okay, we need to show metrics, we need to focus on outcome, impact, blah blah blah. But one thing that many people miss is that just writing that bullet with metrics is not enough. You need to have the complete story behind that metric. Because I have faced this problem where, let's say, I had a certain bullet which talked about a certain metric. I did something to improve this by blah blah blah, and very good at a high level. The other person asked me like the initial question, I was able to explain that, okay, this is what it is. And then, they kept going into depth, right? And after one point, I just saw that I don't have the answer anymore, right? It's not that, it's not that, like, I was unaware of the work, but it's just that I haven't thought through that details when writing that bullet in a resume. I've just thought that, okay, I just need to show a bullet with some metric, and I did that, right? So I think for any conversation that you are having, in product management interviews, whether that's the behavioral round or this product case rounds, or your, resume discussion, keep in mind that every single experience you talk about, you need to be aware of the end-to-end backstory, right? There will be, in most cases, follow-up questions, and you should be able to answer the follow-up questions very clearly. If you cannot answer the follow-up question, the general notion or the general vibe that the hiring manager recruiter will get is that he or she might have done the work, but they don't have complete clarity, right? And which is a very negative point, because as product manager, it's expected that you will have very, very, high level clarity around, like, what you are building or the problem that you are solving. So yeah, I think there can be a lot more if I just keep on talking. But I'd say at a high level, these are some of the few pointers that kind of help me prepare for product management interviews. And I think if people follow these, then yeah, that this will, I mean, certainly like kind of make them more confident about approaching PM interviews.
That's like very well put, and I think you structured it very nicely, the answer, and this will definitely help our audience understand. One, that we need to use frameworks while we are answering questions. Can you just give a few frameworks that come out of your head, the top of your mind, like that have helped you in your PM interviews?
Absolutely, Akash. So um, some of the most common frameworks which I've seen, like in a lot of these companies that they ask these questions, including Tubi. Product design is like one of the very fundamental frameworks that you should be really aware of. I would say product matrix framework, where you will be asked like a matrix diagnostic question. So let's say, for example, um, YouTube watching time is down. Can you figure out what is the problem, right? Something like that. The other question is product strategy framework, which is also very common. So product strategy really means like, let's say a question like, should should Facebook mm, go into the travel industry, right? Something like that. I mean, should company X do this, right? So that's a product strategy framework, which is also pretty common. I've seen a lot of companies ask them. Um, Other than that, I'll say there's this other framework. Uh, um, I'm forgetting the name. Yeah, there's this framework called product execution as well, which
Mm-hmm.
which which talks more about, like, how do you execute a certain product and kind of go to market with that product. And there are a few others as well. I don't remember all the names at the top of my mind right now, but there are around, I think, 7 to 8 core product frameworks which are very, very common across most
Mm-hmm.
companies. I know there are a few companies who also has a product case study round. So, for example, I know Walmart has a round which is called as a product case interview, and what they do is they will give you a business case, right? Mostly connected with them, and it's more like a take-home assignment. So they will tell you, like, go back. This is your case study problem statement, solve it, and then come back to us, and then they'll ask you to present your findings. So I don't know if a lot of companies has this, but I do know that Walmart has a round called product case study. um, but yeah, these are some of the very common frameworks which I definitely should be aware of, because irrespective of, like, whichever industry you might be applying to, there's a high chance that, like, you will have to use some of these frameworks to, like, answer some of the questions.
Yeah, that's totally fair from my perspective. Like you did bring about like a few examples as well. Uh, I wanted to know, like, so now we are answering these questions, and like now that the interviewer knows that we are doing these product design questions in a particular structure, then you come to the aspect, you clear this round, and then you go to the next round, which is specifically the behavioral round. I want to know, like, how did you tackle this? Is there a usual way that you tackle it, or is there some tricks that you have up your sleeve as well when looking at behavioral for the product management interview?
So yeah, I mean, I can share a couple of tips here. I think behavioral rounds are also important, because I mean, I have got rejected through, like, from the interview because of that round as well in many cases. So I do feel that it's important to prepare for that, and that is a different preparation. Like, preparing for frameworks doesn't really, like, prepare you for behavioral rounds. So behavioral rounds, if I have to really summarize at a high level, I would say it's really about, can you narrate a very convincing story that conveys the impact and the outcome of your work, right? Few very top level things to keep in mind. One, the way you narrate your story should sound very organic and natural. However, the stories should mostly be prepared ahead of time. Uh, and you will, I've seen this, even some of the top leaders do this when they are presenting or something. They will, when they're presenting, they will make it feel very natural and free flowing, and it will feel like they just came up and they're talking, right? But I've seen that they have probably spent like a week or more than that just preparing, just rehearsing. So I think practicing, there's no shortcut to practicing. So practice as much as possible. Like, how do you narrate these stories, right? One tip that I can share, this is something that I have done, which is that it's often challenging to compose a very, compact story and still be able to convey the entire message. I would say, when you are thinking out the story in a very fast attempt, don't try to make it compact, because in that way, what we'll do probably is we'll miss out on a lot of important points. So in a fast attempt, let's say there's a question, like pick a question. So tell me about a time when your product failed. Let's say this is a question, right? So you write the story, whatever comes to your mind, whatever you want to say. If there's no time limit, there's no word limit, there's no limit, right? Write the story. Now once you have the main story written out, now you think that, okay, how can I play with words, how can I tweak things such that this story can become more compact, and I am able to narrate this story within a time of like 1.5 to 2 minutes, right? um, Time is very important, because beyond that, trust me, nobody will have that interest to listen, like, or they will lose you, right? When human attention is very low, it's getting lower and lower with time. So you want to be able to convey that story in the minimal time possible, right? So yeah, don't just kind of keep on blabbering, because if you do that, like, beyond one point, you will lose your audience, which is the hiring manager, listener in this case. Now, like, nowadays we have tools like ChatGPT, so I'll definitely encourage, the summarization, which previously I had to do manually. You don't have to do that manually. You can just plug in your actual stories, and you can just put a simple prompt that, okay, we write these in so many words or whatever, right? So that is one tip. uh, Matrix, yes, is very important. So whichever story you are framing, make sure that there is at least one or two metric that kind of quantifies the impact that you have made through that work. Third tip would be, the stories should be very relatable to the other person. Let me just break down what I mean here. Again, this is a mistake that I have made early in my career, which is that when I'm applying for a, when I'm interviewing for a product management behavioral interview, uh, the expectation would be that you give an answer which relates to product management very specifically, right? So one of the challenges that I had faced early on is that let me change that question. So let's say the question is, tell me about a time when um, you had to convince your manager or something, which is again a very common behavioral question, right? Now, the interviewer will never ask you that, okay, give me an example from this specific area or anything. They will just throw the question at you, and they will say, like, yes, you can provide any answer, you can give any experience. But irrespective of what they say, know that at the back of their mind, they are biased to hear product management related stories only. So initially, till the point I didn't have that clarity, what I'll end up doing is, like, I have initially worked in R&D, I have worked in consulting. So I will probably, end up talking stories from there, which sounds like R&D, which sounds like consulting, right? They can be good stories in general, but they don't fit with the product management template, right? And so the other person, they will evaluate at the back of their mind that, okay, this person have a experience of dealing with a situation where he had to convince his manager, but then the experience that he has, that's not exactly how, or that's not exactly the kind of situation that will happen in product management, right? So the other person is trying to hear a story where you have the experience of dealing with manager or convincing stakeholders of something that, that was more of a product decision or a decision around product management, right? So I think this is something very important to keep in mind, that for applying or for interviewing for PM roles, every single story that you talk about in whichever round, make sure that they are very, very product management focused, because knowingly or unknowingly, the listener is biased to hear such stories from you. If you are giving great stories but not fit for product management, they will deprioritize you when they compare you with some other candidate who might have provided a PM story. So yeah, I'd say, Akash, like, these are the three, four things that, I mean, like I'm saying at every step, these are challenges that I have gone through. I have made these mistakes, and that's how I've learned, right? So I feel, especially again, people who don't come from a software or a CS kind of a background, like, they should be, very careful about these things, and accordingly prepare for PM roles.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are some of really helpful tips even for us. So, coming to the most awaited question, you were awarded the even BA Einstein Green Card, which is a remarkable achievement. So, can you walk us through how your work as a product manager contributed to this recognition, and what advice would you have to, the product managers who are aiming for the even EB1A visa?
Absolutely. I'd love to talk about that, Vaidehi. So, just a disclaimer that, this entire thing probably requires a whole different conversation. Just that, because there's a lot of things involved. But for the scope of this meeting, I'll try to summarize and, talk through some of the high level items.
Mhm.
So, uh, let me first talk about like what, EB1A visa is really, and what are the requirements. So this is a visa. They call it as a visa of extraordinary ability, which means that they're really trying to see that people who really have made some remarkable mark in their career, who have, like, really noticeable professional achievements, those are the people that US is willing to consider for this visa, right? Now, making this a little bit more objective. So what really is needed for this visa? EB1A has a set of criteria. There are 8 to 9 criteria, and you will have to meet 3 to 4 criteria, right? I cannot, like, for the time purpose, I'm not going to details of each criteria, but know that for many of these criteria, you will have to do a lot of work even outside your 9 to 5 job. And that's really where most people find it challenging, which is like, they think that my all my time is gone just working at my company. Now I don't have any more time to work on this. But unfortunately, that's also what is needed. You will get certain things from your 9 to 5 job. So if I talk about that right now, um, I we were talking about GNAI at the very beginning. So
Mm-hmm.
the GNAI product that I worked on, that was, recognized by AWS as one of the top GNAI innovation, and we got interviewed by AWS in a conference. So that was one evidence that I could use, to prove that the work that I'm doing is really like at the top of the field. But there are opportunities where you can author a publication by, writing about your work in your company with, maybe, like, with someone else from your company. There are a few other things as well which you can leverage from your company. For example, you will need like very strong letter of referrals, right, when you apply for EB1A, and you need letters from your employer. So people like, who are very senior in your company, like director or VP, or higher people, you need strong letters from them, people who can vouch that what Akash or Vaidei is working on in this company, that's very critical in nature. The impact that they have been able to make in this company, that's like, beyond just a regular impact. And those are the kind of things that needs to go in that later, right? So as you understand, this will happen. Of course, like, building relationships and rapport is one thing, but at the end of the day, you'll have to do the job also really well. Because if you don't do the job well in the first place, I mean, nothing else can save you, right? So I think, for EB1A, if I talk about my experience, I made sure that I am doing the absolute best at my 9 to 5, so that I can get, like, all kind of support that I require from them. At the same time, I made sure that I am figuring out time outside my 9 to 5 where I can do a lot of other things. For example, like, you have to judge competitions and stuff like that. You need to talk at other conferences, and these are things that have to happen outside your 9 to 5, right? Just because you cannot get all of these things done if you solely depend on your 9 to 5. So, but yeah, there are several things that you have to do in order to meet those criteria. And once you meet the criteria, you file your petition, and then yeah, you get that. That's the very, I mean, there are a lot of details, like I said, but a very high level. That's the journey for EB1A.
Got it. I mean, that was a beautiful summary. I don't think you could have done it better. I think the audience will definitely look into this new aspect of product management, which is to get an EB1 from the product management experience. And I think a lot of people will probably get in touch with you later on to know more. So I hope that will help them in the future. Um, I think right now we can go into like a different segue into the resumes because we haven't talked about that. So there are few like common mistakes which everyone make in the resumes, and I wanted to like take one resume up as an example, and we can probably break that down while you explain what kind of knowledge you have on what kind of resumes you've seen in the past and what kind of advice you can give for the audience. So, without wasting much time, let me just like pull this up for you. Um, let me see. Okay, so we have a resume which we wanted to get reviewed from you from a student
Mm.
who is doing his education at Arizona State University. So, mm,
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I think we can do a high level review right now. So to
mhm.
begin with, I do see that there's no header in the resume, which is definitely a red flag. So you should have a
Oh,
header.
we had to remove that because
Okay,
anonymization.
okay. So there should be a professional summary. I'm guessing you didn't remove that, right? So
No.
yeah, so there should be a professional summary that summarizes, like, your how many years of experience you have, what are some of the top kind of products or top genre of products that you've worked in. So what I mean is that, let's say, if I'm writing a summary, I will write, like, I've worked in GNAI and SaaS products, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
it's like I have worked in B2B or B2C, right? So that information should
Mm-hmm.
go in the summary. And you should also have, uh, you know have like some of the impact that you have driven. So for example, you may or may not use metric, but then at least qualitatively, like, you can say things like, I have worked on customer growth or new user acquisition or anything, right? So those are the information that will go in the professional summary. Education, um, I'll tell you what I think. I know there's two kind of thought process here. So I personally think And again, not to demotivate anyone here, but I just feel companies really don't care about your education, right? I mean, you, and irrespective of university, you can be from John Hopkins, you can be from Cornell, you can be from anywhere XYZ. Companies really don't care. When they are hiring, what will really come down to is your experience. So my recommendation is, you want to pull up the experience, like, as much top as possible. So better have the education towards the end of the resume. And so you start with your professional summary, and right after that you start talking about your experience, right? That's the
Mhm.
format that I have followed, and that has really
Okay.
worked for me. um, Coming to experience, mm, yeah, I've just tried to quickly read through what is written here. I do see
No
some
problem.
metrics, which is good. Uh, but one thing I like, few things I want to highlight here. So one is that here I can see that almost for every experience, like, you have a uniform distribution of two bullets. Uh, Typically, when you are applying for a company, the company is really interested in evaluating the latest kind of work that you have done. So, for example, if I am, let's say, applying to another company right now, the new company will really, really judge me on basis of what I've worked on at Tubi over the last 3 years, right? They will really not care what I've worked on in Siemens 6 years back, right? So
Okay.
my recommendation would be that, based on whichever role or whichever company you are applying for, try to make your latest experience as much relatable as possible, and put in more bullets for the latest experience. If that means that you need to cut down on bullets on, some of the experience which is 3 years or 4 years back, that's fine. Doesn't really matter, right? Your latest experience is what should 100% fit with the role that you're applying for. So that's a tip. I think, I found it very important when I was doing my resume. Um, same goes
That's
for
a really good point. Yeah.
same goes for metrics. We talked a little about this, when we were chatting about the behavioral interviews. The kind of stories that, again, at the end of the day, what you are trying to put in your resume is really different stories, different experience which you have had, right? And what you want to prove is that, look, my experience is really a fit for what you need. This is, like, in simple words, what we are trying to do to a resume, right? So it's very important that the stories or the experience that you select in order to feature on your resume, they should, like, be very, very relatable to the company and the role. So just to give you an example, if you are applying for a role that talks about user growth, you have to have metrics and experience that can be related to user growth. If
Hmm.
you are talking about metrics like time savings, or you're talking about metrics like operational efficiency, that's probably not going to really fit in, right? So I think that's another important tip for the audience, that make sure that every single experience you talk about in your resume, the metrics you define, that should be relatable to the particular role you're applying for. The fourth tip I'll share here is that every single line of your resume should talk about a unique quality. Uh, it shouldn't be like, let's say, for example, you uh, take and you consider a matrix of um, improving the product life cycle time, let's say, for example, right? It should not be that in four different bullets you are talking about the product life cycle improvement time, because that's basically wasting the space. If you have already talked about it once, the hiring manager recruiter knows that, okay, this person has the skill of improving product life cycles. They don't need to know it again and again, unless there is exception here, unless that is the really the only thing that the job demands, right? So if the job demands someone who has expertise in product lifecycle management, 100% makes sense that to refocus on that again and again at different parts of your resume, so that, it's kind of emphasized, right? The other person really understand that this guy or this girl has really good experience of handling product lifecycle management. But otherwise, don't repeat a matrix, don't repeat a type of experience which you have already talked about in the resume. um, I think, yeah, Akash, if you can scroll down. Okay, this is the generic thing. Yeah. So, um, my personal, I think I talked about this earlier as well. Certifications has zero value. So I would say don't waste space on your resume writing certifications because it really doesn't contribute anything. If you really want to talk about it, and I'll say talk about it only if you think that this is a really worthy certification, right? I mean, if you are if you have a certification which probably thousand other people also can have, it's meaningless, right? So don't waste time or your verbal space talking about certifications. It doesn't matter. Leadership experience, again, like I'm talking about exactly how it's listed here, this has zero value. I mean, it's saying that I'm just taking one bullet for now. Let's say you're saying that as the founding member, VP of Industry Engagement for Global Career Network. The question is, so what? Like, you are a founder, good for it, but what do I do with that? What did you do as a founder? Did you do anything? Did you achieve anything? That's what I'm interested in, right? I don't care about just the fact that you hold this title. And again, I don't want to demotivate anyone, but I do know, I mean, I've been through the journey, so I know that most of these are just like title holding spots. Not really that the student has done a lot in any of this role, but it's just that they assume that title. And I know, I mean, I've seen this happening in Cornell as well, where a lot of people try to get into a lot of these things, assuming that okay, I'll hold this position and that I can sell in the resume. Doesn't work out. You'll have to come down to the point that what you achieved, like through that role, only then it makes sense. So just listing out a set of leadership experience has no value. You can remove these. Technical skills, I think, what I'm saying in this resume, I think this is a lot. Again, I think capturing some technical skills from the ATS standpoint is not a bad idea, but do understand, just because you have a line in technical skills saying that you have experience in Kanban, that doesn't convince anybody that you have experience in Kanban. It means nothing. If you really want to say that I have experience in Kanban, there should be experience in one of the bullets in the experience section where you say that this is what I did using Kanban and this was the output. So again, like, just listing out a list of keywords as skills doesn't really convince anyone. I know, like, some skills probably you need to put in, because, and to be honest, I don't know exactly how ATS function. But I've heard people saying that if you have to kind of take care of the ATS, then some skills should be captured here, which is okay. But definitely, you don't need 6 lines of skills. If you really want to prove a point that I know Python or I know Tableau, make it a point in the experience, mention it in the experience, so that people know that yes, they actually know, because I can see they have done something with it, right? It's not just a random keyword floating on your resume. So yeah, I think Akash, like, like, there probably are more details that we can talk about, but at a high level, I think if someone is planning to write a effective resume for product management, I think, like, these are some of the few things that they should absolutely keep in mind.
Got it. That was really honest, and I think we needed that. So that super helpful.
Thank you.
Um, so yeah, that brings us to the end of today's episode. A huge thank you to you for joining us and sharing your incredible journey, your insights, your advice. From working on Gen AI and various other diverse industries, and crafting amazing resumes, navigating interviews, and even earning your prestigious even BA visa. I think this has been a great conversation packed with a lot of valuable wisdoms for our aspiring and experienced PMs. So, before we wrap up, what's one final piece of advice or key takeaway that you'd like to leave with our listeners who are looking to excel in product management?
Yeah, so and I will like, I have thought about this, like once I spent some time in product, and I thought back that okay, we do a lot of, like, improving resume, preparing these frameworks, blah blah blah. But if I, really sort of try to connect everything, right, like one thing that will take you to the next level, and not only just for breaking into product, but I think even going forward, as you like set out to make a career in product, which is like building the product mindset, which I feel is the most important thing. I mean, at the end of the day, when I, look at these individual components, whether that means writing the resume properly or that means preparing the framework, it's all kind of ties up to that single point of, the product mindset. Once you can build a product mindset, trust me, like, these things will, you'll see that these things will come up very naturally. Like, I do feel that difference within me, how I would tackle a problem 2 years back versus how I tackle a problem, right? I mean, as an engineer, and I guess if you also have engineering background, you guys should relate. As an engineer, when we see a problem, I think our fast thinking is, okay, how can I solve the problem, right? That's our, like, by default, nature of thinking, right? And that's exactly what you are not supposed to think as a product manager, right? So I think, like, that one piece of advice to people would be that, of course, you still need to build your resume, you still need to prepare for the frameworks and do all of the other things that we talked about, but make sure that throughout that process, you are able to build a product mindset, which means, in other words, you are able to think like a product manager, right? If you are
Hmm.
able to think like a product manager, I think then the rest of the things will become relatively more easier. So I think, yeah, I mean, that's one of the thing. And I'll say that, it's not like I've been able to successfully do that totally. Even now, I am, like, learning every single day and finding out, like, ways how can improve my product mindset. I believe it's a continuous process. I really don't know, like, if there's a point where I can say that okay, you do this and then your product mindset is ready. It's not a quantitative thing. But yeah, if you can think like a product manager, then I think, eventually you will get to that point where, like, you will be a good fit for product management roles, and you will have the skills that is required to excel as a product manager.
Awesome. That was the best way to best answer to end this podcast with. And
Yeah.
so to our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, Akash, for being a super awesome co-host. We hope that our audience found today's discussion really inspiring and filled with actionable takeaways. So, if you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to subscribe. Please share it with your network and leave us with any feedback you have. And join us next week for another conversation on the GHPMC podcast, where we continue to explore the world of product management and innovation. So until then, stay curious and keep building. See you soon. Thank you.